Everyone, I'm going to try to make a video on what it takes to replace the starter on the second gen Infiniti FX with the V8, the FX50. This is a 2011 FX50S. And because the starter is tucked away under the intake manifold, it's a whole lot harder to do than the FX35 and 37, where you can just kind of reach to it by the wheel. So, I'm gonna try to run through this, and I'm gonna be doing some other maintenance along the way. So the first thing, and by the way, I'm gonna be just following the procedure in the factory service manual, which I think you're gonna need to do this properly. First thing you gotta do is bleed off the fuel pressure. So what you gotta do is you're going to need to pull that fuel pump fuse from the whatever box behind the battery here. Maybe you can get it off without removing the battery. I couldn't. So the way you... oh boy. So first what I did is to release the front cover here from the back of it, you pop up these two tabs here. While this thing is still attached to the car, to allow the front cover to move, like so. And then to pull the unit up off the metal bracket it's on, you then press on both of these tabs here. I was kind of holding them from the front. Stick my hand back, and that allows this whole thing to pull up. And now that I have the battery off, boom, the cover releases. So I'm going to pull the proper fuse for the fuel pump, turn the car on, let it stall out. Then you try to turn it on 2 or 3 more times just to make sure, get all the fuel out of the lines, and then we can move on to the next step. Now, because I am not sure that the intermittent no start problem is caused by the starter, I'm going to kind of throw some parts of the car because they weren't terribly expensive when I got them from the Amayama website. I picked up a new fusible link for the battery and also a new ignition button there. They're cheap enough, they're easy enough to replace, and I figured let's just cover all the bases. So this is the fusible link that I'm going to be replacing. Yeah, we'll be doing that as well. Alright, in case anyone is wondering how to pop the ignition switch out or button, I just use a couple of plastic pry tools around the chrome ring outer portion that allowed it to pop out from the dash, and then I pretty much just transferred this outer chrome ring onto the new button, and Bob's your uncle, and that's how it goes. Alright, so to get to that 15 amp fuel pump fuse, you got to remove this back cover off of the actual fuse block thing. And to do that, there are, let's see if I can get some light on them, 2 tabs here at the top. You bend them out while you pull the white fuse block thing up. And no, this won't go very far until you release, well, this thing here at the bottom that the wiring harness goes through, so you got to kind of back that out, and then everything will separate. So finally, I don't know why Infiniti makes it this hard, but there are your fuses, and we're going for the blue one on the top left. Alright, get the battery hooked up with the fuel pump fuse removed. So let's start this thing up. Hopefully it'll die out, and then we'll make sure we get all the fuel out. Alright, well, I guess there wasn't even enough fuel to start it up. So, with that done, we can move on to the next step. Alright, so once you have the intakes out and disconnected from the throttle body, you got to move on to release this quick disconnect fuel line from the fuel rail here. I used this white fitting guy to put it in from this kit. It is the third smallest one in this kit. Took a little finagling and working around in there, but eventually got it out. So now, well, got to move on to the next thing is probably, oh, well, I'll follow the FSM. Probably got to remove throttle bodies and stuff. But anyways, that's done. Well, I am deep in the heart of the beast. Got the intake manifold off. That was a very unpleasant experience. Just a tip if you're doing this, because it's not mentioned in the FSM. Obviously, I'm not doing a full video on how to do this stuff. But once you get all the normal stuff off the intake manifold, there are two things you got to get off the back before it will come out. First is a vacuum line that's coming out of this guy here, and then there is a bracket that's attached to here that you need to, I had to cut the wire tie so I could get access to the bolt, undo the bolt, and then the bracket will come off. But you do have to do these two things on the very back, which is very difficult, reaching over the fender and all that stuff. Rather hard to do that. But I got this stupid thing off. Oh, and look what I found down there. Yeah, that's some sort of mouse nest. Doesn't look like it chewed on anything, but I'll know for sure once I clean it up. But yeah, good times. I hope I never have to do this again, because this is a very unpleasant job. So that's all for now. Alright, so I finally got the starter out of this thing. This is a really, really hard job. I'm going to insert a picture of the position I had to be in to do this work, but I mean, look how far down that thing is in the engine bay. You can't work from the sides of the car, at least I couldn't. I had to climb into the engine bay and sit on this plastic thing on top of the radiator. Thankfully I had the water pump and everything out so I could rest my foot here, and I alternated between putting my foot there and putting my foot there, the other foot there. This is really challenging. To get the two 14mm bolts, I'm about to run out of battery, hold on. Alright, so as I was saying, getting to the two 14mm bolts that hold the starter to the block is challenging because of all these things that are in your way. Thankfully, it doesn't seem like the torque spec on this thing is too high. I used my 3/8 as opposed to my bigger stuff, simply because there is that bracket is in line with the left bolt there. You see the hole I'm pointing at. So my 1/2" stuff was just too big. So I moved down, hold on, to my 3/8, and then I kind of whacked it with a hammer a little bit to break it loose, and thankfully it did break loose. Now, you know what? That was on the right side. On the left side, I had to use just a 14mm wrench, and then from there, use this guy on it, and then I actually had to get my wife for this. It may not totally be necessary, but then I basically use this rod here against one of the corners, and then she hit the rod from on the passenger side over this way to break it loose. And once I broke it loose, then I could go at it with the 3/8. But you're gonna have to get creative. Like it's hard, and I don't see how you could possibly do this if you were not like sitting in the engine bay like I was. So then there's the whole matter of actually removing the starter once the bolts are loosened, because it doesn't just slide out. No, it's I mean, at least on, you know, an East Coast car, there is corrosion and gunk and stuff holding that starter in place. So I use a combination of various hammers, again, this punch tool, whatever, I can't remember what it's called, to work it back and forth, but it would basically just go back and forth and down, and just get stuck. I was trying different pry tools to pry between the starter and the block. I was very scared of cracking the block, so I was being very cautious. I broke out some, you know, penetrating oil to let that get in there. I don't think I could have done it without this guy. As you can see, it's enormous. It's a gear wrench adjustable pry bar thing. That really helped. All my other pry, because it's adjustable, you can adjust the head. So that was really handy. But eventually I was able to get enough of a gap between the starter and the block to use this straight, I mean, it's technically a screwdriver, but it's way stronger than most screwdrivers, kind of a pry bar screwdriver, whatever. And just very slowly work to expand the space between that thing. So it was just, you know, hit it back and forth with the brass punch tool thing, and then work it back the other side, and then pry it up with that guy, and then work it back and forth, side to side, pry it back up. Try to use the pry tools between the block and the starter. And you just kind of keep doing and keep going and keep going. And eventually what did it was this guy, just gently, very gently tapping on it from the top with one of the hammers. But man, so if you're like a bigger guy or you're not very flexible, I don't know if you're going to be able to do this job if you can't sit in that position in the engine bay for at least half an hour. It's really hard. So before you, hopefully you can watch this video before you get started to know what you're up against. But this is no joke. I'm lucky that I was barely able to fit myself in there. But man, I really hope this is a good starter and I never have to do this again, because holy crap. Jesus Christ. I mean, I guess that's where they had to put the starter, but the packaging on this is just really challenging. I know this is not a full install video, it's more just tips and tricks, and hopefully you can watch this before you begin so you know what you're up against and don't start something that you can't finish. So I hope this helps somebody. Good luck. Alright, so I decided to pull the starter back out because I felt like I didn't do a good enough job cleaning up that mating surface down there. If my understanding of how starters work is correct, that whole surface basically functions as the ground for the starter. And so if there's a lot of corrosion there, current's not going to pass through it the way it should, and you know that may contribute to strain on the starter, and potential intermittent no start problems like this car has had. So I wanted to pull this back out and go over the whole surface again. This time I brought out my Dremel to assist as opposed to just doing it by hand, and it made a very, very big difference. It's gone now. You can't obviously see it anymore, and I couldn't actually see it before either until I hit it with the little wire brush wheel that I had on my Dremel. But actually, down there in that bottom right corner, it was actually all corrosion, and I had to hit it for a few minutes, and it was just blowing off clouds of white dust. So I don't think that was going to be metal on metal contact there. So then I kind of did a final round with the Dremel with one of these sanding squishy bits, and that kind of polished it up a little bit. So now I am fully confident that that surface is as clean and corrosion free as it can possibly be, short of bead blasting it or something like that. So I am, I didn't want to have to do this twice. I didn't want to have to worry about, oh, did I do this, the best, did I do the best job that I could? Now I'm confident that when I put this starter back in, if there are problems, it's not going to be from how I did or didn't do this install. So just word of advice, while you're in here, maybe take the extra 5 or 10 minutes to really go to town on that thing and clean it up real good.